My mother-in-law just nuked her chances of having a happy future and a good relationship with us by asking my husband to subscribe to her OF account. Posted by you/primary_ad 1186. Throwaway account, for obvious reasons. My mother-in-law, 40F, has always been very open about sex. When I first met my husband, she managed an adult toy store. About a year ago, she started working toward a degree in sexual health and wellness. She poses nude for a local artist, and around a month ago, she started an OF account. Sex, and openness about it, has always been an extraordinarily normal thing for her. I have absolutely nothing against her working in the sex industry. That's her forte, and I'm happy that she's doing well and enjoying what she does. However, I've had some slight concerns about it before. Not specifically her working in the sex industry or her openness in general, more so how open she is. Especially with her own kids. For example, my husband and I started dating in high school, when she was managing the store. When she would come home from work, she would stop into my husband's, boyfriend at the time, room and hand us sample sizes of different personal lubricants and enhancement creams, saying, "I thought you guys might want to try some of these." It always made us both pretty uncomfortable, and it was extremely awkward to have my boyfriend's mom hand me things intended for our intimate life. But nonetheless, the most conversation my husband and I ever had about it back then was about how awkward it was. Awkward and uncomfortable enough that we never actually used these things, they just piled up on a shelf by his bed. Another time, while we were dating, fresh out of high school, we were hanging out with his sisters. His mom was still working at the toy shop. Once in a while, she would come home with novelty items, and on this night, she walked in with a foot-long glittery adult toy. She playfully swung it around like a sword, his sisters screamed and ran from her, and for a while, we all laughed and had fun about it, snatching it from one another and chasing each other around with a glitter schlong. Eventually, my husband's sister, 17 at the time, said something like, "Mom, you better not have brought that home to use, that's crazy." My husband chimed in with an ew, saying he didn't need to think about that. And his mom laughed and replied, "Oh no, that's silicone. You know the ones I actually use are made of glass." Again, my husband made a weird face but didn't say anything. When we got to his room, I said that it was weird that his mom talked to her children about her personal preferences in the bedroom, and he told me that she's always been way too open about things none of them wanted to know, but that she's always been this way, so he's just gotten used to tuning it out. As time went on, I got used to the openness. And it was just that, being too open about personal stuff within conversation. However, yesterday the openness went too far. My husband and I were sitting in our living room watching TV. My husband got a text from his mom, opened it, and had a visceral reaction. He tossed his phone down, stood up, and walked away from it with his hands over his face, while saying things like "oh my god" and "holy crap" under his breath. Naturally, I thought someone had died, so I started frantically asking what was wrong. All he said was that he didn't even want to open his phone again. I asked again what was wrong, and he told me that his mom just sent him pictures. I was confused, but my concerns started to grow. I asked what he meant by pictures, and he hesitated before saying, "I don't want to ask you to look, but I can't open it back up to delete it myself, so I need you to." My stomach dropped. I opened his phone to see what was there, and I immediately felt nauseous. There was a text that read, "Hey, I know you've always supported me and I wanted to see if you'd be willing to subscribe to my OF so that I can get my numbers up while I'm still getting started. Of course, I don't expect or want you looking through it, but the more subscriber numbers I have, the more engagement I can get. I was also wondering if you'd be willing to share my link to some of your friends at work. My husband is in a male-dominated, blue-collar job. The pics I included are to send to them with the link, but don't tell them I'm your mom." And under it were the pictures. There were 3 explicit photos of his mother. And not just mildly suggestive ones either. They were full-on adult-themed images, one of her in bondage-style attire, one of her positioned provocatively on her bed, and one of her mid-act with a toy in her mouth. My blood was boiling. I deleted what she'd sent, and my husband and I were both silent for a moment. I didn't know what else to say or do, so I broke the silence by asking, "What now?" My husband told me to block his mom on his phone, so I did. I asked if this was something his mom had done before, and he said no. He told me that in the past, she'd asked if he wanted to see pictures of the artwork she had modeled for. He always felt a bit guilty saying no, so he simply didn't respond when she asked, and she never sent them. Then, my husband went pale and started walking to the bathroom, saying he felt sick. While he was in the bathroom, I blocked his mom on my phone as well, including her social media accounts. When my husband came back out of the bathroom, he called his sister. He asked her if she was with their mom, and when she said no, he explained to her what had just happened. His sister was also speechless. Then, he asked her not to say anything to other family members right now and explained that neither he nor I would be in contact with their mom for a while. He also told her that any time we were home for a visit, he would let his sisters know so that we could plan to see them, but that his mom would not be included in those plans from here on out. My mother-in-law quickly realized that she was blocked on everything by both of us, and by that night, she had the whole family blowing up our phones asking why. The constant messages haven't stopped, and so far we've just muted our phones as we don't even know what to say. How do you explain that your mother sent you explicit content featuring herself? Top/relevant comments. Commenter. Covert incest is a form of non-physical sexual abuse. Examples of covert incest could be a parent sharing intimate, graphic details of their own sex life with a child, practicing voyeurism, exhibitionism, inappropriate sharing of images, and similar behaviors that, while still being sexual abuse, are described as covert due to their intangible nature. Ops response. Thank you for this comment. I've never heard of covert incest, but now I know exactly what is going on, and my husband and I both have some reading up to do. Update 15 hours later. Many ask for an update, so here is a small one for now. When my husband got home from work today, he did have me recover the messages for evidence, should it be needed. I screenshotted the message with timestamps and each of the photos. In the photos, I scribbled over her, not so, private areas as well. After that, I sent the images to my phone and once again deleted the messages from his phone, both in his mother's texts and mine, per my husband's request. This was something that several people suggested in the comments of my previous post, and believe me, we were on the same page before I even read them. My husband and I are also regulars in therapy, both individual and couples counseling. When we got married, we agreed that doing counseling from the get-go was a good idea. Not because we have problems in our marriage, but because it gives us the tools to confront issues in the future and keeps us on the same page 100% of the time. That being said, I asked my husband if he'd ever mentioned his mother's sexual openness in his own therapy, and he said no. Since it's how he was raised, he saw it as mostly normal. I suggested that this should most definitely be brought up at his next session, and he agreed. I also asked if there was anything else that had happened in the past that crossed a line. Outside of conversations, he said that his mother would often come home from work with new lingerie and wear it around the house for the rest of the night as if it were regular clothing. When she did this, he would either stay in his room or go to a friend's house because it made him uncomfortable. Several people ask why there hasn't been a conversation about her discussing uncomfortable topics. There has been. When my husband and I were dating, both of us minors, she would talk to my husband explicitly about our intimate life. Some of the questions she asked him were if he liked girls who were clean-shaven, if we were using lubricant, if I preferred textured protection, if we had tried specific positions, and even whether I preferred certain types of physical stimulation. When she would ask these things, my husband simply wouldn't answer with more than "I don't know," but eventually, he did tell her to stop. He told her that he didn't want to talk about those things with her, that he knew I wouldn't want her discussing them either, and that her questions made him extremely uncomfortable. Her response was to get defensive and act as if she'd been disrespected. She would say that sex was normal, that she should be able to have these conversations with her son, and even accused him of shaming her sexuality. So, he went back to ignoring the questions altogether. Some suggested that we have an in-person conversation with her about what happened. Not only do we live far away, but we aren't ready for that conversation, and we especially aren't ready to discuss it face-to-face. This happened yesterday afternoon. And it will honestly be a very long time before any sort of communication happens with her at all. I did find out what she's been telling the family. She's saying that she asked if her son supported her, not if he would subscribe to and share her content. That is why the family has been reaching out and asking why we've blocked her over that. We will be telling the family exactly what happened, but we aren't quite ready to do so yet. That will come within the next few days. We're still processing everything. My husband has a therapy session tomorrow, and we have one together the next day. We will likely wait to talk to the family until after our sessions. That way, we can get our ducks in a row a bit more, and we are even considering legal action. Again, that is something we will bring up with our therapists before taking further steps. That's the main reason we took screenshot evidence. For those curious, yes, my mother-in-law is young. She had my husband at 16 or 17, and we got married young as well. Very common in my family, and in the field of work he is in. And that field is the military. So, him sharing his mother's content would heavily affect him, not just in terms of being fired. It could lead to a sharp, sexual harassment/assault response and prevention case and possibly a dishonorable discharge, which would make continuing after the military extremely difficult. That's all I have for an update right now, but trust that there will be another. Thanks so much for all the advice and support I received on my last post. I seriously gained such good info from the comments, and it's been really helpful. Second update 2 days later. My husband and I have spoken with therapists about the entire situation, and we've drawn a conclusion on how we will handle things. As advised by our therapist, and based on what we've planned ourselves, my mother-in-law will be cut off until she does the self-work and is no longer inappropriately expressive about sexual topics toward family. That being said, my husband and I are prepared for her to be cut off permanently. She will likely not attend therapy herself, as she sees it as unimportant. I'm not sure if her opinion comes from a previous experience, but she believes that therapists just tell you everything wrong with yourself and why you need to change. They don't actually try to help your mental health, just make it worse. I'm sure everyone can imagine what has led her to draw those conclusions. As of now, my husband and I will not be pursuing legal action. We've decided that, for us, at this time, we would prefer to establish clear boundaries regarding what we feel comfortable with. If that is respected, that's great and nothing more will come of it on our end. If that isn't respected, and there are further attempts to contact us, such as creating new accounts, we will most likely seek a restraining order. As I mentioned in a previous post, I have saved screenshots from the original incident, so we will have that evidence ready if needed. On to the family. As a reminder, my husband's side of the family was blowing up our phones, asking why we would block my mother-in-law. What my mother-in-law told them was that we blocked her after she simply asked for our support in what she's doing. What they didn't know was that she sent inappropriate photos of herself. We explained the situation, without sending the photos, of course, but we did describe them. Things were understood quickly, and nothing more was said. I don't know if family members have confronted my mother-in-law about it. If they have, great, she needs to hear it. If they haven't, oh well. Now, from my own perspective. I was raised in a family where everything related to sex, our bodies, or even periods was considered taboo. So much so that when my mom found out I had a crush on a boy at 13, I cried and apologized because I thought I was in trouble. Asking questions wasn't okay either, so when I did have questions, I couldn't simply ask. For example, I once overheard my mom say the word corn and didn't know what it meant. When I asked my parents, I was sent to my room. So, at 7 years old, I took the family tablet and searched the word. I saw some explicit content, got scared, and put the tablet back in the living room. When my parents checked the search history that night, I was yelled at and not allowed to use electronics for the rest of the year. With that in mind, a sex-positive family was incredibly foreign to me. The idea of being able to talk to your mom about sex or your body without being punished was completely new. When my husband and I were dating, I didn't realize his mom was taking things too far. I thought this was just sex positivity. Of course, I had a gut feeling at times, like when I questioned the toy conversation, but when the response was she's just really open, I accepted it and stopped questioning it. To answer some common questions, my mother-in-law is not this extreme with my sisters-in-law. I always assumed it was because they were younger, but the fact that she sent explicit photos only to my husband really cemented what others have called covert incest. It turns out my mother-in-law also isn't nearly as intrusive with the girls. She talks about her own choices, but doesn't pry into theirs like she did with my husband. I mentioned before that she used to ask my husband invasive questions about our intimate life when we were dating. In another phone call, my middle sister-in-law confirmed that my mother-in-law has never done that to the girls. In fact, there have been times where she's overheard them say something about their boyfriends and responded with, "Ugh, lower your voice, I don't want to know." Meanwhile, she would ask my husband directly about our sex life. Another question was, "Where's the father-in-law? He's never been in the picture." My husband's dad left when my mother-in-law was pregnant with her youngest daughter. My mother-in-law also doesn't have a father herself, he left when she was a baby. And there aren't many men in the family. A couple of distant uncles and some cousins, but as far as close family, my husband was the only male growing up. And yes, some people guessed it, my husband looks exactly like his biological dad. Same build, hair type and color, bone structure, eye shape, even a similar birthmark. That fact makes this whole situation feel even more uncomfortable. And finally, no, we don't have children. However, I've always had concerns about leaving future children alone with her because of how little regard she has for boundaries. I will know when my children are ready to learn about certain topics, and those conversations will come from my husband and me, only us. I've always worried that my mother-in-law would ignore our wishes and talk to our future children about these things on her own. Unless she addresses these issues, she will never be alone with our kids, and maybe won't even know them. Overall, this is my final word on the situation. The original post was removed from this subreddit, so it's been reposted on my personal page for those interested in reading. I'll remain active on this account to answer questions, so if anything else comes up, feel free to ask. Thank you so much to everyone for all of the advice. I didn't even know the term covert incest before posting, and I'm grateful to have learned it. It's given my husband and me a new framework to understand and reflect on the past. He'll be continuing to explore this in therapy, and I'll likely bring it up in my next individual session as well. It's something we'll be discussing together in couples counseling beyond just yesterday's session. Again, thank you everyone. /relevant comments. Commenter. What a terrible, terrible day to be literate.